Let's get to the point. Look at yourself in the mirror. No, seriously, observe yourself carefully. What do you see?
Wait, don't answer yet. Let me guess it for you. The first thing that came to your mind wasn't something you like, right? It's that little imperfection that no one else notices but that you see in high definition, constantly. How big is your insecurity? Maybe it's the height you didn't reach, those centimeters you think you're missing and that seem to separate you from your dreams more than anything else in this world. You think everyone notices it, that they talk about it, that they judge your worth by something you don't even control. But let me give you a quick and brutal dose of reality. No one is paying as much attention as you think. No one notices those missing centimeters, except you. And yet, it is precisely those centimeters that hold you back day after day, night after night, dragging you into a pit of insecurities that seems to have no bottom. Do you want to know the uncomfortable truth? No matter how tall you are, your insecurity will always seem bigger. The problem is not your height, but the yardstick you measure yourself with. That yardstick, let me tell you, you didn't design it. It was given to you. You took it. You accepted it without questioning it. You live trapped in the prison of others' standards, believing they are yours, believing that this dissatisfaction is part of your identity. Who decided you should be taller? Who convinced you that those extra centimeters would make you more valuable, more desirable, more successful? Think for a second. Was it your family? Were it the silent glances, the fleeting comments, the jokes that disguised cruelty with humor? It wasn't your height that determined your worth, but what you learned to believe about it. Insecurity is not a physical defect. It is a mental trap perfectly constructed by the society you live in. But here comes the real mystery. Why do you allow those standards to define who you are? Why do you voluntarily submit to the judgment of others? Why do you chase the validation of people who don't even validate themselves? Constant comparison is a subtle poison you consume every day, and it slowly poisons your self-esteem, your relationships, your dreams. It's not you who speaks when you criticize yourself in front of the mirror. It's the echo of a society obsessed with impossible ideals. And while you sink into that perverse game, life keeps passing by. Opportunities slip away while you worry about centimeters that no one remembers except you. I want you to reflect on this deeply. Everyone, absolutely everyone, is carrying a similar insecurity. Maybe it's not height, maybe it's weight, the shape of their nose, the color of their skin, the hair they don't have or the one they have too much of. Each person carries a silent struggle within them, a constant war against something they didn't even choose. And yet, we hide, we pretend to be okay, we isolate ourselves believing that we are the only ones who suffer. Do you see the irony? We unite in insecurity, but we distance ourselves for fear of judgment. So, what is the way out? There is no magic cure for insecurity, but there is a powerful antidote. Radical self-acceptance, genuine compassion towards yourself and others. Sounds cheesy? Maybe, but try for a moment to fully accept yourself, with everything that society points out as a defect. Accepting doesn't mean giving up. It means freeing yourself. When you accept your height, your weight, your unique features, you destroy the most powerful weapon others have against you, your own insecurity. Ask yourself, what would happen if tomorrow you woke up completely free from the fear of others' judgment? What decisions would you make? What paths would you take? Who would you dare to approach? That life, that version of you living without restraints, is not as far away as you think. It's right behind the wall you built brick by brick with others' insecurities disguised as your own. The real secret no one tells you is that your insecurities can become your greatest strengths. When you recognize and accept your flaws, no one can use them against you. Security does not come from the absence of insecurities, but from the power to look them in the eye, without blinking, without hiding, without apologizing. Because the moment you stop apologizing for who you are, you start to truly live. So look at yourself in the mirror again, but this time observe beyond the centimeters you're missing. Observe the person you are, with your emotional scars, your doubts, but also with your dreams, your goals, and your incredible potential to connect with others. Observe that behind that apparent imperfection is your true essence, the one that makes it worth getting to know you, valuing you, appreciating you. Your insecurity is nothing more than the shadow cast by a poorly directed light. Direct that light towards you, towards your inner self, towards your real values. And when you do, you'll discover something surprising. What you thought were your weaknesses are, in reality, the most solid foundations of your identity. That insecurity that imprisons you today will tomorrow be the testimony of how you learned to accept yourself, to grow, and to become someone truly free. Because in the end, the toughest battle we fight in life is not against the world's expectations, but against our own distorted perception. Win that battle, and you'll have conquered the most valuable freedom of all, to be authentically you, without apologies, without fear, and above all, without waiting for anyone's permission to exist fully. Look at yourself again, and take a deep breath. Do you know what's hidden behind that insecurity? It hides a desperate, almost silent need for external validation. And I want you to think about this. Every time you seek approval from someone else, you are handing over part of the control of your life, slowly surrendering your identity into foreign hands. And believe me, no one should have that power over you, because that power is uniquely yours. And here comes the disturbing part. We are taught from childhood to chase external praise as if it were oxygen for our lungs. We become addicted to kind words, to likes on social media, to superficial comments that temporarily feed our ego. But that ephemeral dose of self-esteem lasts as briefly as a sigh. At the end of the day, you are left alone, empty, insecure, wondering what you must do to get more approval tomorrow. It's an endless wheel of emotional dependence where your personal worth is constantly at stake, in the wrong hands. I ask you an uncomfortable, direct question. Who would you be without the opinion of others? What decisions would you make if external approval were not a variable in your life? The answer to that question defines exactly who you are now and who you could become. Because the person who builds on solid foundations does not wobble when others withdraw their approval. That person does not depend on volatile opinions that change from one day to the next. That person is you, even if you haven't realized it yet. The human being is psychologically designed to seek connection, social acceptance, love, and belonging. But what no one tells you is that this legitimate search often becomes distorted and turns into a mechanism of emotional dependence, a sick need for validation. Do you know what the most dangerous trap of all is? Validation is not love. It is a fragile, ephemeral, conditioned currency. If your value depends on how much you please others, you've sold yourself cheap. And this brings us to a profound, delicate, but crucial point. Do you know how to tell if you are seeking validation instead of authentic love? Simple. Notice if you constantly adapt your personality to please the person in front of you. Notice if your self-esteem rises and falls according to the opinions of others. If you answer yes, you are playing a dangerous game in which you always lose, because whoever depends on external opinions never has full control of their life. The psychological root of this is deeper than you think. Anxious attachment, emotional insecurity, the compulsive need to be liked, all stem from early wounds, from emotional absences, from small rejections you experienced in childhood and never fully healed. And now those wounds disguise themselves as physical insecurities, complexes, a need for approval, that constant fear of not being enough. That's why you must understand that the solution is not in changing the external, but in working deeply on the internal. Healing is painful, yes, but living a life completely depending on external validation hurts even more. Self-knowledge is not a passing fad. It is the solid foundation from which you can rebuild true, authentic, and lasting self-esteem. Because only from emotional authenticity can you truly connect with others without giving up yourself. Stop asking for permission to exist. Stop apologizing for taking up space in this world. You are not here to meet others' expectations, nor to fit into arbitrary and cruel social standards. You are here to live fully with your imperfections, your doubts, and your wonderful uniqueness. In conclusion, remember something essential. When you build your identity from within, no external opinion can knock you down. And there lies your true power, the psychological strength that no one can take away from you. Because when you finally realize that your value doesn't depend on how many centimeters you measure, how many followers you have, or how many people validate you, then and only then are you truly free. And here's where another fascinating point arises. The insecurities, though you may think they are yours, are often emotionally inherited. Have you ever stopped to think that these insecurities, these physical obsessions, these complexes you carry are not really yours? They are stories repeated, pains transmitted from generation to generation, like a kind of invisible and toxic inheritance that no one questions, but everyone carries. Perhaps that obsession with height comes from a grandfather who always felt he couldn't impose himself for not being tall enough. Or perhaps it's the insecurity of a mother who worried about being attractive, according to standards she couldn't meet. This is the uncomfortable secret few accept. Family insecurities are like emotional ghosts, constantly repeating patterns that prevent us from living our true essence. We struggle to accept this because it means questioning the emotional structure we grew up with, but recognizing it is the first step to breaking a chain that should never have existed. And here's where a deeply psychological and transformative concept comes into play: emotional differentiation. Differentiating emotionally means understanding and accepting that you can love your family, but you don't have to carry their insecurities, their fears, nor their frustrated expectations. Do you know how liberating it is to look your parents, siblings, friends, or even an entire society in the eye and say, "This isn't mine. I don't make it mine because it doesn't belong to me, because I build my emotional life, not you." Do you dare to do that? It's uncomfortable, it's risky, but it's also the path to an emotional freedom you may never have experienced. This process requires courage, because it means questioning what you always believed you were, but it also frees you from living enslaved to standards you never chose. The key question is, how long will you carry emotional baggage that doesn't belong to you? And going even deeper, here's another revelation that might make you uncomfortable. What if I told you that your insecurities, those that have haunted you all your life, are actually excuses disguised as fear? Think about this carefully. Sometimes, those insecurities function as a protective shield that allows you to avoid making decisions, facing challenges, or taking on responsibilities that you know would radically change your life. Because, admit it, it's more comfortable to say you didn't achieve something because of your height, your weight, or any other invented defect than to accept that maybe you lacked the courage to try. Does it hurt to hear that? Good. It means you're getting closer to something real. Insecurities sometimes protect us from the discomfort of true change. As long as you can blame a supposed defect, you'll never have to confront the terrifying possibility that maybe you're afraid to discover who you could be if you really tried. Because deep down, that's what we fear the most: discovering our true potential and having to take absolute responsibility for what we do or don't do with it. And then a fundamental question arises. What price are you willing to pay to live comfortably trapped in a false insecurity? How much longer do you plan to keep hiding behind the comfortable and cowardly excuse of not being enough? But here's the unexpected twist. When you finally dare to face those excuses, when you decide to act despite the fear, something wonderful happens. Insecurities don't magically disappear, but they lose their power over you. The fear will still be there, the doubts too, but you'll realize that you can move forward despite them. And that experience is transformative because it reveals something deeply valuable: that it was never necessary to eliminate your insecurities to succeed. You just needed to learn to live with them, to move forward despite them. In the end, insecurity is an uncomfortable companion that reminds us of our humanity, our limits, but also our enormous potential to overcome them. It's not an enemy to be destroyed, but an inevitable part of the human experience that you can turn into a powerful impetus for your personal growth. So remember this clearly. No one who has achieved something extraordinary in life did so because they lacked insecurities, but because they decided to move forward, to walk with them, and to turn them into emotional fuel to go further. Insecurities are inevitable, but choosing how to use them depends exclusively on you. The power has always been in your hands. You just have to dare to take it. Now, there's another deeply interesting dimension that almost no one mentions. The relationship you have with your insecurities defines the quality of your personal relationships. Yes, you heard right. That little physical complex, that constant obsession with some detail you believe is imperfect, is determining how you relate to other human beings. Have you ever noticed how you become more defensive, more distant, or even aggressive when someone indirectly touches that wound? Without realizing it, you've become a permanent guardian of your vulnerability, spending enormous amounts of energy protecting something you don't even need to hide. Let me give you a different perspective. Imagine for a moment that instead of hiding that vulnerability, you shared it openly. It sounds terrifying, I know, but therein lies precisely the power of radical authenticity. When you dare to show your insecurities without fear, you not only dismantle the weapon others might use against you, but you also build real, deep bridges of empathy and closeness. Because people don't connect with you through feigned perfections, but through shared vulnerabilities. There's something profoundly liberating in understanding that your vulnerability is, paradoxically, your greatest emotional strength. And here comes another fascinating point. Showing authentic insecurity is contagious. By doing so, you automatically create a safe space where others can lower their defenses and also show who they truly are. Do you realize the immense emotional power in that? By accepting and expressing your insecurities, you emotionally liberate not only yourself, but also those around you, generating more authentic and profound relationships. Now, do you want to go even further in this reflection? Insecurities not only condition your social life, but also your professional development. Surely you know brilliant, talented people who are trapped in mediocre roles simply because they don't feel capable of advancing or taking on greater challenges due to their insecurities. They think they don't deserve more, that they're not attractive enough, smart enough, charismatic enough, or capable enough to opt for what they really want. They resign themselves to living in the background, waiting for someone else to give them permission to shine. Here's the uncomfortable and necessary truth. No one will give you that permission. No one will come to offer you what you don't dare to demand as your rightful due. And that insecurity, that constant doubt, becomes the perfect excuse to keep you in the apparent comfort of mediocrity. Because you've been taught that it's safer to live dissatisfied than to risk publicly failing. But the biggest failure is not trying and failing, but spending your entire life imagining what could have been if you had had the courage to believe in yourself. Now I want you to consider something different, something even deeper. What if insecurities were actually an internal call, a psychological alarm that indicates exactly where you need to work emotionally? Think of them as a precise, though uncomfortable, compass pointing directly to the areas where you need to grow. If you're obsessed with your physical appearance, it's a clear sign that your self-esteem depends too much on how others see you. If your insecurity is related to your intelligence or skills, perhaps it's because your identity is based on superficial achievements more than on your own intrinsic value. At this point, you must make a crucial decision. Ignore that emotional signal and continue living limited by fears, or listen attentively and transform each insecurity into a map for deep and valuable self-knowledge. Because in the end, each insecurity carries a vital lesson that is waiting to be learned. And here lies a fantastic paradox. What you fear most about accepting yourself is usually what you most need to understand to move forward. Want a definitive clue to discover what you need to work on emotionally? Look precisely at what makes you most uncomfortable. There you have a clear and precise map of your next great personal challenge. And the fact is, insecurities are, as hard as it may be to believe, your best allies on this path toward emotional and psychological maturity. They are uncomfortable, yes. They hurt, of course, but they guide you with absolute clarity toward where you need to grow, toward the version of yourself you so desire to reach. So the final question I want to pose to you is direct and brutal. Are you ready to turn your insecurity into your greatest tool for personal growth? Or will you continue to allow it to be the perfect excuse to stay exactly where you are now? The answer depends exclusively on you, because the power to transform what limits you into what liberates you is there, waiting patiently for you to decide to take it. But before I finish, I want to reveal something even more shocking, a truth that few are willing to face. The most terrifying thing is not that insecurities exist. The most terrifying thing is spending an entire life ignoring who you could have been if you had dared to overcome them. Imagine, just for a moment, being at the end of your life, looking back and realizing that you never really lived, that you were always trapped in the mirages of your own insecurities. That is the true human tragedy. Not having tried to discover who you really are for fear of not liking, not fitting in, or worse yet, for fear of discovering your own greatness. And let me tell you something that might surprise you even more. The only thing worse than not being enough according to external standards is having become exactly what others wanted you to be, betraying what you really wanted to be. Because believe me, it hurts much more to disappoint yourself than to disappoint those who expect something from you. So now that you're here, Now that you've reached the end of this deep conversation, I want to challenge you radically. Take that insecurity, the one that makes you most uncomfortable, the one you hide, the one you avoid looking at directly, and do something radically different this week. Use it to step out of your comfort zone. Turn it into an emotional experiment, a real opportunity to change something significant in your life. Do you dare to do it? If you accept this challenge, I want you to go to the comments and write this sentence: "My insecurity no longer decides who I am." Write this not for me, not for this video, but for you, as a public and personal commitment that from now on, insecurities will be your teachers, not your owners. And remember, the subscription is not for me, it's for you. Because here we will continue to delve into these uncomfortable, necessary, and transformative topics that most prefer to avoid. If you're ready to keep discovering what no one else wants to tell you about human psychology, subscribe now, because I assure you that this emotional journey is just beginning, and you're going to need company to go through it. And now, the time has come to say goodbye. But before I do, I leave you with one last reflection, one that I want to haunt you today, tomorrow, and perhaps for a long time to come. Your real life begins just beyond the insecurity that you still dare not face. Until the next video. Or perhaps not, because if you really apply what you just heard, maybe the next time we meet you won't even recognize yourself.